and this is my second video on the topic of mental health care that restores a person's mental health instead of just covering up the symptoms with patented synthetic chemicals, psych drugs. Hopefully, you've already watched my first video about what a disgrace conventional American psychiatry is, because I believe it will help you see how the orthomolecular approach is different and why it's so effective. I'm not a doctor and I don't give medical advice. I'm a former teacher and now an investigative reporter. In these videos, I'm reporting on what I've learned from more than 20 years of research into the natural causes and cures for mental illnesses and using these treatments on my own family. If you have found the drug approach helpful, I'm happy for you. I'm not trying to talk you into changing anything, but if you're one of the tens of millions of people who are not happy with the drug approach, you also deserve to have treatment that works for you. Years ago, when one of my loved ones became psychotic, I was told by several psychiatrists and psychologists that, quote, obviously mental illness is incurable and everyone knows it, end quote. They said I should just learn to accept this so-called truth, and if I didn't, I was in denial. But even back then, I had studied orthomolecular medicine enough to know that these people were clueless and that my loved one would eventually get his mental health back. And he did, because he was given appropriate treatment, namely orthomolecular care. After my experiences with conventional American psychiatry, I am completely disgusted by it. I want everyone to know that drugs are not the only approach in town. Orthomolecular treatment works. It's safe. It means using nutritional supplements to correct one's biochemistry, and no one has ever needed a liver transplant or died from taking food supplements. Again, if you're a danger to yourself or others, you don't have a choice right now regarding what type of care to use. You have to take whatever drugs are prescribed by your doctor. However, there is no law against adding nutritional supplements to whatever you're already taking. So, let's begin this video with the definition of orthomolecular medicine. Ortho means correct, and molecular refers to the body's molecules interacting with each other. In other words, our biochemistry, which is a physical thing. The word medicine in this term means rebalancing one's biochemistry with nutritional supplements, which can be purchased from most any health food store. Lab tests are ordered if necessary. Here, the word medicine is interchangeable with the words treatment or approach, and there's nothing proprietary about it. Family doctors can use it, so can naturopaths and other doctors, and lay people too. Before 1968, there was no umbrella term for all the research and real-life successes that proved mental illnesses are caused by physical problems. That all changed when an internationally known scientist, Linus Pauling, PhD, winner of a Nobel Prize in Chemistry, coined the term orthomolecular medicine in 1968 in an article in Science magazine. He also provided the definition we still use today. It means restoring one's mental health by correcting his or her biochemistry with substances normally present in the body. This means using supplements of the same nutrients the human body naturally runs on, such as vitamins, minerals, proteins, and fats, in the amounts that are optimal for the individual. Don't be misled by any psychiatrist who says you have a so-called chemical imbalance that requires man-made chemicals only a conventional psychiatrist can prescribe. Human beings don't have a chemistry. We can only have a biochemistry, which means, again, the interactions of substances normally present in the body, which can sometimes go out of balance. And while we're on the subject of myths that keep people mentally ill for life, don't believe any doctor who tries to claim that nutritional supplements don't work. These doctors have no education or experience in using them, and yet they seem to believe they're experts on the subject. In reality, they're only parroting what they learned in medical schools that receive millions of dollars from drug companies that want you to buy their drugs. The first research I know of that proved one physical cause of schizophrenia was from the early 1900s. At that time, there were tens of thousands of Americans who had become mentally ill and were placed in psychiatric hospitals, mostly in the South. They suffered from a disease called pellagra, which most people believed was some kind of a contagious disease. American public health officers, such as Joseph Goldberger, spent many years trying to figure out what could be causing such a horrible plague. He and other public health officers found that if they gave protein to these schizophrenic patients, they recovered and were sent home. This was before synthetic psych drugs were invented, back when the objective was to find the natural physical causes of illness so they could restore people's health. Their goal was not to just suppress symptoms until the patient died. Eventually, these scientists narrowed down the protein in question to the amino acid tryptophan. And finally, in 1937, Dr. Conrad Elvegem discovered that the body biochemically turns some of that tryptophan into vitamin B3, which comes in two forms, niacin and niacinamide. So, thousands of these patients were given niacin, and it restored their mental health, and they were sent home, cured of pellagra, which the scientists proved is one common physical cause of schizophrenia. Be aware that back in Dr. Elvegem's time, the amounts of niacin given to patients were very, very small compared to what we can easily buy nowadays in most any health food store. If a person takes enough niacin, he or she can develop the niacin flush, which is a red flushing and tingling of the skin. So niacinamide is often used instead because it does not commonly cause that reaction. That's what I used on my loved ones and myself. I'd like to add that the niacin flush is only temporary and is not harmful. When I took a 500 milligram capsule of niacin, the flush lasted about 45 minutes. If you've ever studied human biochemistry, you know that it takes thousands of years for our biochemistry to change. So what scientists learned maybe 80 years ago still applies today. Eating a diet lacking in nutrition doesn't supply adequate protein or vitamin B3 or other important nutrients for a person to remain mentally well. In addition, scientist Roger Williams proved that many of us simply need more vitamin B3 than we can get from even a good diet. Research on the physical causes and cures of mental illnesses continued, and in the 1940s, Canadian biochemist Abram Hoffer entered the picture. In 1949, he became a medical doctor. Dr. Hoffer studied the biochemical causes and cures of mental illness and soon became a psychiatrist. Like Goldberger and Elvegem before him, Dr. Hoffer discovered a common physical cause of schizophrenia, in this case, an adrenal metabolism disorder. He learned that some unfortunate people have adrenal glands that produce too much of a chemical called adrenochrome. According to Dr. Hoffer, having too much of this biochemical in the body typically results in a quick temper, anxiety, depression, and paranoia. If the level goes high enough, psychosis or schizophrenia will result, and it's usually paranoid schizophrenia. A byproduct of adrenochrome is a substance called pherols, which can be detected and quantified with a urine test. The last time I had this test done, it was $69. This adrenochrome problem is now called pyroluria, which means pyrroles in the urine. In the 1950s and early 60s, Dr. Hoffer and scientist Humphrey Osmond carried out 8 double-blind, placebo-controlled studies which proved that Dr. Hoffer's adrenochrome hypothesis was correct, and that about 30% of all cases of schizophrenia are caused by malfunctioning adrenal glands. Even though the American Psychiatric Association claimed the Hoffer and Osmond studies were invalid, Dr. Hoffer continued restoring his patients' mental health by correcting their adrenal metabolism problem. For many years, he used a urine test to determine if any of his patients had an elevated level of adrenochrome. If so, he had them take niacin if they didn't mind the niacin flush. Here is a sampling of the 50 books written by Dr. Hoffer. He was also the editor of the Journal of Orthomolecular Medicine until he was in his 80s. If it hadn't been for these books, one of my family members would still be hyperactive, and the other would be dependent upon chemical straitjackets to suppress his symptoms of psychosis, most likely for life. As you can read in Dr. Hoffer's books, he also had all his patients take B-complex and a couple of other nutrients. And over the course of more than 50 years of his career, the vast majority of his patients recovered. They didn't just have their symptoms suppressed with chemicals for life. They truly had their mental health restored because their natural biochemistry had been corrected. When I needed help from my relatives, I was forced to choose between what conventional psychiatrists wanted me to believe and what Dr. Hoffer was saying. So I chose to believe Dr. Hoffer, and I'm so glad I did. Life is good now. Orthomolecular is now practiced in at least 40 countries, even though it is still used by only a small percentage of practitioners. Japan is the exception because there, tens of thousands of people practice orthomolecular treatment with or without a doctor's help. The Orthomolecular Society holds an annual conference for practitioners from around the world. This is Dr. Hoffer with his friend and colleague, Linus Pauling, who you may remember coined the term orthomolecular medicine in 1968. You might go over to walshinstitute.org. Dr. William Walsh, author of Nutrient Power, has trained hundreds of lay people and doctors on how to use the orthomolecular approach here in the U.S. and also in Australia. The Australian website is biobalance.org.au. I know very well how devastating it is when a loved one has become mentally ill, because conventional psychiatrists tell us it's incurable. Of course, it's heartbreaking to hear something like that, but I have not found that statement to be true when it's an acute case. The orthomolecular definition of acute is that the person has been ill for 2 years or less, or this is only their first or second episode of mental illness. Also, I have personally seen from experience how young people often recover quickly, even though their case doesn't fit the normal definition of acute. Dr. Hoffer found that around 90% of acute cases of mental illness can be cured, as well as about 50% of chronic cases. And keep in mind, every case of mental illness is acute in the beginning. When my loved ones needed psychiatric help, there was no guidebook out there to help me step by step, so I had to study a whole lot of books to find a treatment that would actually restore their mental health. So I wrote the book I wish had been available when I needed help. The first half of The Secrets to Real Mental Health is a personal account of what we went through, and the second half is what I consider the layperson's guide to orthomolecular treatment. All the scientific information was approved by Dr. Hoffer himself, and the foreword is also by Dr. Hoffer. There should be a link below this video to order a copy, or you can always get one from Amazon.com. Please note that the M.Ed credentials after my name stand for a Master of Education degree. It is not a medical degree. I educate and I report, but I don't diagnose or treat anyone. America's drug and talk therapy approach to treat mental illnesses is clearly an enormous, sad failure. I'd like to end this video with a quote by Dr. Hoffer that I believe describes American mental health care perfectly. The use of drugs to treat the symptoms instead of curing the unfortunate victim is similar to that of a parasite, which seeks not to kill the host, but to feed off of it for as long as possible. If you have found this video helpful, please click like, and I hope you'll subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching. Part B on orthomolecular treatment is up next.